Oh man, how was that as a fuck you to Ryan Johnson when Luke Skywalker shows up in this? And Rey tries to throw her lightsaber away, and he catches it. He's like, "This is the most fucking important thing ever." And he looked right at the camera, and flipped off Ryan Johnson.
You guys. Wow.
Watching the whole thing together, and I freaked out. I'm like, this doesn't track. You can't follow what's happening. You can't follow what the big stakes are. I got really scared.
Well, Luke had a change of heart since he died, right? He became one with the Force, and now he's a little more chill. He's less like bitter and cynical as he was in Jedi. You always said, Last Jedi, the Luke Skywalker storyline, that he's you know.
It's the most interesting idea that movie has.
And everybody hates it. They ruined Luke Skywalker.
I still think you could have made a good arc out of it. You still could have gotten to a point where he's accepted the Force again. But it's a character arc, and you get to that point in like the third movie.
Yeah, just the fact that he acknowledges something that was unintentionally made clear in the prequels, which is that the Jedi are kind of awful. Like the fact that he mentions that in The Last Jedi is like, okay, that's interesting. But now it doesn't matter. Here, Rey, have your lightsaber again.
They just left him in a really poor position.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of little slights at Ryan Johnson. The Snoke in a tank for sure was one. The lightsaber bit.
Well, Ryan Johnson didn't create Snoke though. He just killed him.
Right.
Well, it's because nothing matters. That was the driving force of that movie.
Yeah.
Rey's parents are nobody. Snoke doesn't matter. All these things that were set up in the last movie don't matter. So yeah, then what do you do after that?
He was trying so hard.
You scramble and you make a movie that feels rushed because you're trying to introduce a bunch of shit and have it pay off.
It's overcompensating too. Because all you got to do is, if that's your plan, is to like, okay, let's fix all these things that everybody hated about The Last Jedi. You could do that without shoving 15 other story ideas into it.
Well, yeah. The idea that Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter, right? The whole time she thought, I don't know, maybe they should throw in some clues like, no, maybe you're a part of a Skywalker family, you know?
Well, if somebody smart were in charge from the beginning and planned this out, maybe you could have done
No, I'm saying from Last Jedi.
Okay.
You're starting with this movie, right?
Yeah.
You could do that. You could play with that Rey backstory a little, mold it, change it a little differently. But what Jay is saying, and is what I agree with, is the entire cast, other than Rey, Palpatine, Kylo Ren, and maybe Leia to a certain extent, are all completely useless. Finn and Poe and Rose and C-3PO and Chewbacca, Lando, everyone's useless. They're given the bulk of the story, which is to also to track down some guy who was sent to kill Rey's parents because he might have the Wayfinder, which could lead. That's what Luke was searching for to get to the thing.
We got to go get a thing that'll tell us how to find a thing that'll take us to another thing. And
Palpatine didn't need 10,000 starships to blow up every planet, and like all that shit was in there. So then they could have a space battle. And then you had 2.5 hours to flesh out this convoluted. Because there's that little scene where Rey and Kylo were talking. You did before about your parents.
Oh yeah, the scene where they're kind of forced talking again.
And she sees the Vader helmet and stuff like that. That was good.
Yeah.
You know, like, but
the whole Star Destroyer confrontation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have a handful of scenes like that, and one or two little action scenes that are, you know. Remember when they went to the Burning Man festival? I mean, what was that?
That was where they had to go to get the thing. That would tell them where the other thing was.
Yeah, and there's so many like we got to get the thing to get the thing to get the thing, and it's like, and all of that just confused the whole storyline and the whole emotional stuff. Kylo killing Han Solo, his relationship with Leia, he's still wavering between if he's good or bad. Yeah. Rey is also kind of not sure who she is, whether or not she's failing at her Jedi training. Remember, she couldn't hit the ball. And then she had to hit the ball with her spear. I always thought the end of that spear looked like a lightsaber. Turns out it was.
That's great.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, so that she pulled her lightsaber out of it?
the
Yeah.
tip of
I didn't
it.
notice that.
I've always thought
I didn't
that it
notice
looked like
that.
a lightsaber on the tip of that spear. It really does.
The whole ending of this movie, like, I had no sense of where anyone was. Everyone's just flying, and there's 5,000 Star Destroyers. And then we cut to
And they gotta
Palpatine, and it's
blow
just
up
flashing
just
light.
the one for some reason.
Yeah. That's the other thing, too, and that's another, like, just 80-yard line. They blow up that one, and then there's, like, some line of dialogue about how, like, everyone in the entire galaxy is now destroying all the other Star Destroyers.
For some reason, and I don't understand this at all, none of the Star Destroyers could leave the Sith planet
You know, here's why.
unless they had the navigational beacon from the other Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
They can't just say, point at their ship at a star and just go that way. They're just stuck there. I don't know why.
They were all interlinked because it was hard. Poe had a line about it.
Of course he did. One line, right?
And it was they can't all leave the planet because the navigation's too hard.
You just turn your back to the planet and start going in a direction.
Although all their ships came to the planet and left at the end without any problem.
Yeah.
Who are we talking about now?
All the giant fleet of all the ships from all over the universe
Oh,
all came
yeah.
at the end, but they all fought in the battle on the planet, but then they also just left
Yeah.
at the end. So they didn't need a navigational beacon. But remember, they were going to blow up that navigational beacon, and then the bad guy, General Pride, was onto them, and so they switched it to the main ship.
Yeah.
And then they just shot a gun at the main ship and blew it up.
Once they know they're gonna get blown up, can't they just switch it to a different ship? Can't they switch it to like 8 different ships? Oh, switch it to each individual ship. There you go.
We haven't gotten all the navigational beacons in stock yet. They're on order.
He hasn't willed them into existence yet.
Yeah, he's still working on that. Why did you wait? Why didn't you do that first, Palpatine? It takes him like a year of dedicated concentration with Sith magic to will a Star Destroyer into existence.
Oh, Palpy? Can we just talk about Palpatine? The part that made me laugh the hardest was when he just shot his Force lightning up into space, and it flew everywhere. It's such a shame, too, because there's like a couple moments early on in this movie where the two of them are interacting, and it's like, these guys are great together. And then, like, Adam Driver's great, like, Richard E. Grant, who was General Pride or whatever Pride, he's a great actor. And it's all just in service of nothing.
We don't know much about General Pride.
No, just mean and evil incarnate. Never smile once.
Like, all these good actors.
That's why they go off and do movies like Marriage Story.
That's true. In between doing big Disney films.
Adam Driver, Star Wars pays for his mansion, you know. Marriage Story pays for his coffee.
Did anyone notice, because I've generally liked Daisy Ridley in these movies, but in this one, she seems checked out. There's a part when she's on the ruins of the Death Star.
She's been getting hate for how long has it been now?
That's true. It could be
6
some of
years?
that.
Yeah.
Her character's a Mary Sue, so I hate her as a human being. But there's a part when she's on the ruins of the Death Star, and there's that moment where she's fighting the dark version of herself, you know, and the dark version has the double-sided lightsaber or whatever. She looks like she's laughing. She looks like she's holding back laughing when she pulls out that red lightsaber. It's like she doesn't care anymore, does she?
I think they said have a devilish grin.
That didn't come across at all.
Yeah, I came off as sort of thinking this whole thing was a farce. And it's true. But no, yeah, she, I mean, I think in the very first movie, you know, she's a relatively unknown actress in the first movie, so she was giving it her darndest.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you're probably right.
She's done. She's over this shit. Well, that was something too that came out recently, right? Like in interviews where all these main actors were saying like they're done with Star Wars after this. Finn was like, I don't want to be Disney Plus or something like that.
What would it take to get you to come back to do Finn again?
In what?
I mean, I don't know if Finn is...
You ain't gonna Disney Plus me. I ain't getting no Disney Plus.
How did Ray know where that little farmhouse was?
She's just there. She found it on Google Maps. It's in Tunisia.
Don't think about it. It's emotional. It's emotional change.
The Force. The Force.
The Force.
Oh, the Force. Okay.
Force emotions, Force emotions.
Remember, Leia and Luke's ghosts were hanging out there, so they guided her
Oh, okay, that's fair. And why was that random old lady just in the middle of fucking nowhere?
so that she could say the line, "I'm Rey Skywalker."
I'm just a Skywalker now. I've just decided it.
They made her old because she's wandering around the desert. That's her path to go shopping and come back to her house. She goes past the old Skywalker, or Lars homestead, many times.
I'm shocked that wasn't a callback to somebody.
There's very few characters it could be.
It's Watto. Super elderly Watto.
It could have been that super old lady who said, "My bones are aching, Annie. There's a storm a coming." Do you remember her?
No.
You don't?
I don't remember. I've
My
seen
bones are aching? Is that what she says?
She warns them of the dust storm that's coming.
Okay.
Oh, my bones are aching. Storm's coming up, Annie. You better get home quick.
So Rey's a Skywalker because she just decided to be.
Well,
I know
That's
thematically
fine.
what they're doing, but it's just like,
she chose the lightness over the dark.
yeah, the Skywalkers are all
It
that
was very.
exists.
It got very Jedi at the end. Join me.
Oh, where it's like anticlimactic and not very good. Yeah.
No, Return of the Jedi.
They just blatantly redid the throne room scene
Yeah,
from Return of the Jedi.
because he opens up the ceiling so that she could see the space battle.
Yeah.
Your friends are
Yeah.
going to die, and and
Just with lots more strobe lights.
yes, and join me. Whatever. Those are the more interesting stuff in the movie. Everything every other character did was boring. Remember the magic space dagger?
Oh God, that disappeared.
Oh, yeah. No, well, that guided them to the wreckage of the Death Star, and then I guess it's not important after that, right?
No, remember, she held the dagger up and the little thing came out?
Yeah.
And she held it up.
And it made the shape
Okay.
of it. It was like the Goonies.
I
They do
guess,
that with the.
I guess it just wasn't important after that. Yeah.
It was to help her find where the Wayfinder is, the little Borg cube, Borg thing.
Yeah.
It looked like a Borg nodule thing that's on the Borg ships.
Why was it a dagger? I was waiting for her to have to stab Palpatine with it.
That was probably in the...
Like one of the edits, one of the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's things like that. Like at the end when Lando, that girl sits next to him. I thought it was going to be like revealed that that's his daughter or something. I kind of feel like maybe that's something that was in
I'm
another
assuming that's
edit.
just we don't have time.
It's possible.
Why even
something-
put that in the movie then? Why have Lando meet this random character?
Why have Poe's old flame show up? Why have that random character at all? Why have the horses?
Yeah, yeah.
There's so much that should have just been cut out.
So the magical space dagger, where did that get found?
That got found on the planet with all the rave dancers.
After
Right?
they got sucked down into the beads, did they find it?
That whole section of the movie felt like more Indiana Jones to me than anything else. There's
her-
quicksand, and then there are underground tunnels,
Yes,
and,
underground
and
tunnel. There
bones.
some archaeological stuff.
Yeah.
Even her holding the dagger up with the
Yeah.
felt like him putting the staff of Ra in the hole.
Yeah.
And the sun shines through the thing, and
When was that dagger made?
it had Sith runes on it.
It knew to line up with the crashed remains of the Death Star. And it's got ancient Sith runes on it.
The Force, Rich.
Oh, the Force. It's not sloppy writing. It's the Force.
The little that comes out like alters its shape.
But the grooves on the dagger lined up with the wreckage on the Death Star.
In the future, it knew the future.
Yeah, the Force.
Yeah, the Force. Oh, that's so dumb.
But that dagger, C-3PO interpreted it because he wasn't programming, didn't allow him to speak Sith language.
That's why they had to go to the World War II village. They had to wipe his memory, which someone thought that was funnier than it was. Them wiping his memory.
No, they wanted to give C-3PO a heroic moment. That was his sacrifice
Yeah,
for
but
the
then
greater
after
cause.
that, then there's so many jokes about him
Yeah.
not remembering anything. And
When I was editing our last video, I was watching an interview with Anthony Daniels, and he said he constantly tried to get George Lucas to give C-3PO some kind of moment.
Oh.
And it was like, how about C-3PO does this? I tried to give him a little humanity. And George's response was always, he's always scared. And then he would come up to George Lucas again, and George, here's a moment where C-3PO could save the day. And, no, He's always scared.
That moment in
Like
this,
it's great listening to. I don't particularly like Anthony Daniels. I think he's kind
He's
of
a
full
little
of himself.
arrogant,
Yeah.
But that when he tells that story, George Lucas just shut him down every time. He's always scared. Shut up. And then he eventually gave up. So that was probably Anthony Daniels, his ego pushing up. I got to do something heroic in my final film as the world's greatest character ever invented, because I play him.
that moment too, and it was in the trailer where they're about to wipe his memory, and he's like, "I'm looking at my friends for one last time."
Friends that hate you.
Yeah, well, that's the thing in the trailer. I was like, I'm assuming out of context in the trailer that this is they're pulling memories of him with like Luke and Leia and Han from when he was younger. Oh no, but he's talking about these new characters that he barely knows
That hate him.
that hate him.
But yeah, so C-3PO interprets the language on the dagger, and it says to go to Endor, the moon of Endor, right?
It's not Endor.
I guess it did, yeah. Yeah.
The moon of Endor.
Okay.
Endor is a forest moon, and I think the Endor system is a bunch of planets,
Yeah.
because they show several planets.
They're not on the Ewok planet.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't think so.
No. Well, we see that at the very end.
Yeah.
We get a little Wicket cameo.
Yeah, you're right. So I guess it crash landed on a different planet, even though it was in orbit of Endor.
J.J. Abrams doesn't like space. He doesn't want to understand space.
See, I just assumed, like you did, when we talked about this, when the Death Star wreckage crashed on Endor, it obliterated the forest
Yeah.
for decades.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was all kind of like
Flat.
flat and dead grass and stuff. So I really don't know. It was on, but basically the knife, the magical Sith dagger, said to go there to find one of the little triangles.
You need a MacGuffin to find a MacGuffin.
There are several MacGuffins, and that's the Sith Wayfinder, which looks like a Borg device to me. It's glowing green, and it's like a physical device, which is so weird that the Sith would need like a
For an ancient magical.
yes.
Yeah.
It's like if you're a Sith or you're in tune with the dark side of the Force, the story logic would just assume that you would be led there.
You know what? I'm just delighted when Star Wars ever decides not to resort to space magic. So I'm fine with it.
All right. But yeah, so the Emperor had one on the Death Star in his little closet because he was a clone of an ancient being known as Palpatine. He should have changed his name when he became Chancellor and took over the galaxy. He should have called himself like Bob Smith or something.
Assuming your clone theory is what happened, we still don't know.
We're not really sure. Everything happened so fast.
I still think it might be his corpse from, well, at least his charred body from the Death Star explosion.
He landed on his fingers. Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
he felt fingers first. When
I broke a nail.
he was falling into the core, and then when it blew up, that pushed him like away, and that's why he survived.
Flew out of space.
He
window.
flew out into space after that.
He was shooting lightning so furiously it burned all of his fingers down to like
Yeah,
lumps.
yeah.
The heart of the original movies is those characters. And even though I don't love Return of the Jedi, all the stuff with Luke and the Emperor and Vader is great. It's emotional, and this is just...
This is so similar to Return of the Jedi, because Return of the Jedi, while good, has its flaws. And its flaws come in the second and third act. The opening, fine. Jabba, we got to rescue Han, a little adventure. And then after that, they had nothing to do with the characters, other than Luke.
Yeah.
Leia becomes a basic, like, ground troop person.
And Han is there also.
And Han is there also. And their epic love romance is now just them. We got to break into this bunker. And then the idea of a second Death Star is goofy. And we have nothing for Han and Leia and C-3PO and Chewbacca and R2-D2 to do.
Yeah.
Except for do all these things on the Ewok planet. And that's essentially this movie. We have nothing for Finn, Poe, Rose, C-3PO, R2-D2, BB-8, Eeyore? Igor?
Well, they're still, they have nothing for those characters to do, and they're still introducing new characters.
Yes.
Presumably so J.J. Abrams can pay his friends.
Yes, they had the lady who rides around on a horse, ex-stormtrooper. Her name was like, I don't know.
Zana.
Oh yeah, Zana or Lana or.
I know that because I had to buy her action figure.
Okay, Zana.
It's not Zana, is it? Then the two new characters in this are Zana and Zori?
I think so.
Really?
Someone's getting lazy.
Maybe one's Yanni.
That would be a shock if Yanni showed up in this film.
Remember, I thought that they went to that Smuggler Cove planet to meet Zori Bliss, the bounty hunter, because she had components for the time travel machine.
Oh. I would have wholeheartedly welcomed time travel into this film.
Yeah.
Instead of, we got to go to the place to get the thing that will lead us to the other thing.
It would have made for a bigger mess.
Yeah, I would have welcomed a bigger mess.
Yeah. I'd say the final act of this movie is a pretty big mess, just visually, viscerally. That's when it got kind of like fun schlock to me, where it was just like nonsense, and the Emperor's hamming it up.
Yeah, Ian McDermott's performance is always.
He's always great.
Always great. It's always a joy. If he was a little more comical, I would have enjoyed it more. It wouldn't have fit the tone properly because
they definitely went for a satanic Palpatine.
Yes, they definitely.
I like the atmosphere of that whole place he was in too. How like dark and moody it was, but I guess I figured that wasn't enough. So then they turned on the strobe lights.
Yeah, but it was basically a Jedi ending. The rest of our characters are doing a thing to destroy a thing, right?
Yeah.
They got to take down the shield generator. And they need the Ewoks' help, and the battle starts. And then Luke is confronting the Emperor. Rey is confronting the Emperor.
They got the technically they even have like the ground battle segment when they have to storm the top of the Star Destroyer.
with not primitives, but
They got horses.
they got horses. So there's that element, that non-technological element. They're just
Yeah.
people that are riding around horses and living off the land because they're former stormtroopers. So so there's an Ewok-y thing going on there.
That J.J. Abrams,
Rich, you
he
said
knows
it,
how to remake other people's movies.
you said it a million times. Star Wars is
Creatively bankrupt.
Wait a minute. Finn, early on in this movie, says, Rey, I have to tell you something, when they think they're going to die. And then he never tells her.
I think I don't know why they left it in the movie, but I'm assuming they were going for like a love plot. Like
Sure.
he
Well, that's
loves
his whole
her.
thing is like, in the first two movies, yeah, he's always concerned about where's Rey, what's happening to Rey, how's Rey.
But if you're not gonna have a payoff
If you're
for
not going
that,
to pay off, just cut it out.
cut that out. Yes.
They ran out of time, Rich. The movie's coming out in 2 days. We got to just stop editing.
Was there so much in the movie that they just couldn't edit? They couldn't edit it properly.
That's some of the stories. They're saying that, yeah, there's just lots of different edits and re-edits of this movie, so who knows?
he's trying to tell her that he's gay. So we have our first gay Star Wars character.
We have that in this movie, though.
There is
Two out-of-focus females in the background kiss. So progressive. Way to go, Disney.
there was that old lady.
It was that
with
old lady,
pointy
the bird
nose.
lady.
Yeah, the bird
yeah.
lady. She I guess was a lesbian. So how progressive? Wasn't a main character. They wrote off Poe as not being gay because he did that thing where he's like, "Hey, Kerry Russell." He's like, "Huh?" And then she
Did you
goes,
see that?
"Yes." Yeah. Were your eyes closed during the film? At the end,
I had to take a mental break.
she's still wearing her stupid helmet because it's not actually Kerry Russell. She's in one scene where her eyes. I think her and J.J. Abrams had a joke. Inside joke. They said,
We're going to tell people you're in the movie.
No. How little can you be in this movie, and how much money from the back end can you make? And it's like a private joke. They said
See your eyes for 5 seconds. Yeah.
and the rest of the time, it's just and she did her voiceover in like the sound booth for like an afternoon. So she was on camera, her eyes for 10 seconds, and then she was in the sound studio for half a day, right? And
Now she's going to make $10 million.
yes, at least a couple million. And she had a body double, like in her Zori Bliss costume. 'Cause
That's
she
someone
never took
else.
her helmet off.
Yeah.
But at the end, she's you don't even see her face. And Poe is like, huh? He's doing like a, how about you and I? Like
He started doing this, which I thought was weird for Star Wars.
it was implied that they might have been a thing way back when. And then she goes, and he goes, and then he walks out of frame. That was got a case of the not gays.
Yeah. Just make Poe and Finn gay. Make them super gay. Why the fuck not? That's how they come across in this movie. Just do it. There was some interview with J.J. Abrams where he was like doing that like wishy-washy. Like I mean, maybe they could be. We're Disney. We're progressive, except not really. We just want to give the illusion. They're so phony.
Is this a new term, passive progressive? It's like a play on passive aggressive. Because remember, what's it, Josh Gad's like minor character? in
Beauty
that?
and the Beast, yeah, he's a supporting character. He's gay. You see him dancing with a guy in one shot. Look how progressive we are.
We wouldn't do it with the main character. Can you imagine Finn and Poe like kissing? Like, I mean, like, I wouldn't care. A majority of people wouldn't care, but it would be a thing.
If they did that, then Star Wars fans would complain about it on the internet.
Some Star Wars fans.
And they don't complain about anything on the internet
No,
now.
half
so.
of them would complain, half of them would champion it.
Yeah.
Because we're in like split down the middle politics
Everything,
with Star Wars. But yeah, Finn is not in love with Rose
Yeah.
because remember she's like, I want to come with you. He's like, no, stay back. And then he pats her on the shoulder. He's like, do you remember that? He's like, stay back, buddy.
She's clearly in the friend zone.
She's been put in the friend zone even though she smooched him in The Last Jedi.
Disney's market research says they don't want you in this much of the film. You stay here.
And she basically almost killed herself to save him. Like, and then he gives her, for that, she gets a pat on the shoulder and stay back here, buddy.
Yes. Oh, you're breaking apart.
Finn and Rey had good chemistry on screen. They shouldn't have spent the entirety of The Last Jedi apart.
I think Poe and Finn are good together too. Like the scene in The Force Awakens when they're escaping. They get in the TIE fighter or whatever, and they're trying to escape. Like those two are good together, and then they're separate for the entire rest of that movie and all of the next movie.
They got like a little buddy cop vibe going.
Yeah.
One's a little more anal retentive, and one's a little more like loosey, hotshot kind of guy.
Regardless of whatever flaws the movies had, those characters or actors do have good chemistry together.
It makes you wish they were in a real movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My personal opinion, all of Star Wars is just a fluke.
You gotta take it a little easy, Luke. You may be the hottest bush pilot this side of Mos Eisley, but those little skyhoppers are dangerous. Keep it up, one day, whammo, you're gonna end up a dark spot on the downside of a canyon wall.
It's all the Empire Strikes Back is the linchpin that is holding this house of cards together.
The first one was a disastrous film until
Editing-
Marsha Lucas and
Editing and breakthrough special effects saved it.
yeah. And music.
Yeah.
The John Williams score. It was like a perfect storm, and George Lucas was, he was the second luckiest man in show business after Ringo Starr. I got this space thing with there's a monster or something. Yeah, hundreds of talented people make this work.
You say the second luckiest? George Lucas sold Star Wars for $4 billion, motherfucker.
No, all right. And let's also, very briefly, to close out our review, address the comments that say, well, now do the prequels look so bad?
No, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They're not better because these new ones aren't great. It doesn't somehow make the prequels better.
Prequels still are bad.
Like, literally none of the characters in the prequels are likable or interesting.
And the
they're
stories make no sense, and everything about those movies. And that's the thing with this, like, they look great, the effects are great, the actors are good, and it's just, it's the stories that's lacking. I will say, at least the prequels are fun to make fun of. There's so many baffling, weird things in them, and these new movies are just so bland and kind of forgettable.
A nice blend would have been having some of Lucas's ideas in this new trilogy. I know he was talking about like the wills and the Force and all this. Like
it's more George Lucas weirdness, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, no, we don't want your ideas. They're too weird. But blending that and kind of mixing that with some modern day talent and kind of figuring out a new way to go, they really need to plan this stuff out.
What do you do with Star Wars now? Where do you go?
There's a whole bunch of high-paid people asking themselves this question right now, as they watch the reviews come in.
They sound a little more panicked than you, though.
I just think it's out of gas. It's very hard to nail down exactly what to do with Star Wars. I think The Mandalorian's on the right track in terms of just scaling things back. Like that episode where they're on the space station, so simple.
It's just it's 5 characters total. It's like
one hallway set.
It's fascinating.
To see the contrast between that
Yeah.
and then this movie. Fuck! I feel like I'm being smacked in the face by this movie.
We doing recommendations?
No.
No, we're not doing them, or no, you wouldn't recommend it.
Well, not if you're prone to seizures. There was a sign outside the theater that said that.
Yeah,
That's a thing.
Maybe wait for it to come out and like stream it, but like turn the speed of the movie down to like 1/4 speed.
Fuck! I'm not gonna have a. I'm not gonna have a panic attack.
That's the new option by Netflix. So watch a movie at 25% speed.
Yeah. So you don't feel like you're having a heart attack from Star Wars.
Here's a magical space coin. This will grant you access to any Star Destroyer. Oh, that's what that was. I'm giving this to you, Poe, for use in scene 312. How did this ship get aboard? I heard you chuckle.
Oh yeah.
The guy comes in there and he's like, "There's this rusty spaceship that they just left on."
They just completely cut out how they got on board the Star Destroyer. Like why nobody noticed this rickety old ship landing and our characters getting off the ship. You
No,
know?
Rich. Wrong. 2 stormtroopers walked up and they said, "Show us your identification," and they shot him.
Did that really happen?
Yeah.
You know what? This movie. No, seriously.
It happened so fast.
It happened so fast. I did not notice.
It was not like. Do you remember Star Wars?
No.
Do you remember?
Oh, yeah,
When they landed
Star
the
Wars.
Millennium Falcon, the Millennium Falcon got tractor beamed into the Death Star, and then
They
they
hid under
hid
the things
and
and
waited
then-
for like 2 hours, and then they scanned the ship, and then they.
It's like a scene.
Yeah.
Like a constructed scene
Well, it
with
was
a point.
Yeah, they were infiltrating the Death Star, and they had to be very fucking careful not to get
Well, then
caught.
the guys go in with the equipment, and then
Yes.
you hear the noises.
Hey, can you give us a hand down here? The stormtroopers go up to find out what was that noise. Then they steal their costumes. Then they do this whole thing where they have Chewbacca as their prisoner.
They come down. They pretend the
Yeah, the
communicator's not working.
TK421, why aren't you responding? And TK421 has a problem with this trans. Oh my God, it's Chewbacca! He's murdering me! And then they have this whole plan.
Or you just have somebody say, "How'd the ship get on here?"
That's the perfect scene comparison because it's basically the same scene.
Yeah.
Where there's 2 stormtroopers and they just come out guns blazing and murder them in this giant hangar bay where there are windows everywhere, security cameras.
The scene's 30 seconds long as opposed to 5 minutes.
Oh, it
Yeah.
was like 8 seconds, Jay. And then they just run out.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna storm, and they're just shooting everyone in the hallways.
Yeah, they run down the hallway and they shoot a bunch of people, and then 2 stormtroopers come up to him, and Rey just uses the Force.
Yes.
It's like, why don't you just do that with all of them?
Are you gonna recommend Rise of Skywalkers?
No, but I am going to point out that this entire trilogy has just been a waste of potential.
Yes.
Adam Driver's great. I know everyone hates Rey. I still like the main cast. I just don't think they ever did anything really interesting with them.
Yeah.
Yes, it was succinctly said. Well said, Jay.
No, I would not. I think this is the worst one. I think I like The Last Jedi more than this, and I don't really like The Last Jedi either.
At least The Last Jedi took its time.
Yeah.
It's nice and slow.
Yeah, this movie was just so exhausting, and not in a fun, like, ooh, it's so action-packed kind of way. I'm just like, I'm done with Star Wars.
As are a lot of people. It's.
Now, let's talk about The Mandalorian.
Can I give my recommendation, Jay?
Absolutely.
No! No, I echo the sentiments of Rich almost exactly. The cast is good. Some ideas are okay, but overall it's a clusterfuck. And I think that's what a lot of people are saying. Is it has good parts? Did it leave me in tears? No. I don't want to say if you legitimately like this film, you have a low IQ. But if you legitimately like this film, you have a low IQ. Because you are watching all the things happen so fast, and the critical part of your brain that kicks in that's supposed to kick in.
It doesn't have
But wait-
time to.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. It keeps going by, going by. It's like being on like some kind of roller coaster ride where you can't even process. You know what I mean? It's just all the undulations and the speed. And then at the end, hey, I think that was fun.
Yeah. I heard the John Williams score.
Yeah.
It's like you're on the little cart going through the haunted house, but none of the scares are very spooky, so they just have the car go by really fast. Well, was that a monster? Oh, was that a what?
You know what I think was the saddest part too? Forgettable. The score was for being an exclusive John Williams score was forgettable.
Yeah.
Except for the moments where you're supposed to remember things when they would bring up the old
Oh yeah,
music.
Leia's theme and all that stuff.
Certain, like when she walks into the Death Star's throne room, you get that.
Dun, 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 yeah.
So the old stings that would come in throughout with the rest of.
Yeah.
Rey has a theme. I like her theme.
What is her theme?
Do 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 do. It's very whimsical. It's different than the other stuff. So. Hey, it's something from the series that I remembered.
News to me. It's news to me. Ray's theme. What the fuck are you talking about?
Ray's theme from Ghostbusters? Does Ray have a theme?
Ray Parker Jr.'s theme.
Ray
from
oh
Ghostbusters?
yeah, that's a great theme. Yeah, that's
They're going to remake that song for the new movie. When there's something stranger things
They did that for
in your neighborhood, who you gonna call? Finn Wolfhard. And maybe the girl who was in Godzilla. But if they were both in Ghostbusters, it'd be too obvious. What's her name?
Millie Bobby Brown?
Billy Bobby Brown.
Millie Bobby Brown.
Millie Bobby Brown.
Which is funny because Bobby Brown did a song for Ghostbusters too.
It all ties
It all
together like
connects.
the Force. Do you remember when?
I will no longer question logical loopholes in these Star Wars films.
Do you remember? Here's another thing that'll blow your mind.
Oh,
Jay.
okay.
Bobby Brown's cameo in Ghostbusters 2, he said, "Hey, can I have one of those proton packs? My kid brother wants one."
Hey, you guys got another one of those proton packs? My kid brother really wants one.
The proton pack is not a toy.
I guess that's right.
Then Egon tells him, "No, a proton pack is not a toy." Cut to 30 years later, and kids are firing the proton packs.
It has a gunner seat?
The proton pack is not a toy. The proton pack is not a toy. The proton pack is not a toy.
Directly against Egon's recommendation, his own fucking granddaughter.
Paul Rudd will be the kid who gets to use a real proton pack.
What?
What?
The kid brother will end up grow up to be Paul Rudd.
Bobby Brown's
Bobby
black.
Brown's a black
He's
man.
adopted. It's fine. He's adopted.
Ooh, swing and miss, Rich.
Thank you guys all so much. And thank you guys all for being here too. I think we're done here, right? Are we done here? We keep our mics on.
I quit. I quit Star Wars. I'm done. I'm never talking about Star Wars again. Bye.
We'll see when we talk about The Mandalorian.
We'll see when we talk about the Picard series and Ghostbusters 2020 and everything else that's coming out that just continues to ruin our lives. We've never addressed our George Lucas bust.
Oh, is that who that is? I thought it was Bob Vila.
Goodbye, everybody.
Hold on, I can't do this anymore. Where's my microphone? Hey, it's over though, you know. We don't have to talk about Star Wars movies for at least a year or 2 or 3.
As always, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us.
Stands as one of the strongest military forces on the planet. In this video, we will explore the critical moments of its evolution that saw its transformation from this 13 colonies belonged to the British Empire and were thus associated with its Royal Navy. This fleet was one of the strongest of its time, with a force of several hundred ships that campaigned across the world. The Royal Navy would operate in the American theater to maintain its dominions, with large-scale deployments during the War of Jenkins' Ear against the Spanish in the 1740s, and during the 7 Years' War against the French in the 1750s. However, due to the great distances between the Old World and the New, most of the time, the ships in operation in the Americas were of local make. The colonies boasted a large number of commercial vessels for fishing and trade, which were jerry-rigged into lightly armed schooners and sloops for naval operations when the need arose. The captains of such vessels were often American privateers who had obtained letters of marque and reprisal from the crown to prey upon the enemies of Great Britain in times of war. It is this early maritime tradition that would ultimately give rise to the U.S. Navy. The official creation of the U.S. Navy is tied to the American Revolution of 1775. While preparations were being made to fight the British on land, a similar scramble was taking place to combat them at sea. To this end, the colonies turned to their ragtag force of privateers. Over 2,000 commissions would be put out, calling on captains to answer the call to battle. Local governments also cobbled together their own small forces, like the Massachusetts Naval Militia. Meanwhile, the Continental Congress discussed the formation of an official navy to serve all 13 colonies. For over 5 months, however, they dragged their heels in heated debate. Proponents argued that a navy was necessary for the war effort and to win over allies, while detractors argued that it was a foolish diversion of precious resources that was doomed to fail. Eventually, on October 13, 1775, the Continental Congress passed the resolution creating the Continental Fleet and a 7-member naval committee. Over the following months, a series of warships were bought, retrofitted, or constructed. The Continental Navy would remain small, with a maximum strength of 34 ships, whose size ranged between 8 to 30 guns. By comparison, the Royal Navy had several hundred ships at its disposal, which included many first-rate ships of the line, carrying more than 100 cannons on board. This incredible imbalance in power was partially made up by the colonial privateers, which fielded several hundred of their own small ships. The naval component of the American Revolution saw few traditional pitched battles. In these rare cases where lines of colonial and British ships faced off, the Royal Navy showed its supremacy, as is demonstrated at the Battle of Valcour Island. Most of the action instead consisted of smaller encounters and raids on shipping lines or ports. Here, the Continental Navy, and in particular the privateers, actually proved quite effective and took a pretty serious toll on the already strained British supply lines. Colonial forces didn't just operate along their own shores. Instead, they frequently sailed out into the Atlantic. In 1776, for instance, colonial forces launched an amphibious assault on Nassau in the Caribbean, targeting a munitions depot. In 1777, famed Captain John Paul Jones would sail the 18-gun Ranger to attack the British coast and even land troops on enemy soil. Whilst in the European theater, he would gain even more renown by winning a tactical duel with a superior Royal Navy frigate in which he was told to surrender by the enemy commander, only to shout back, "I have not yet begun to fight." Despite scoring some symbolic victories, the plucky colonial fleet had a rather checkered performance in the war. It was only in 1778 that the balance of power at sea would favor the Revolution, when France officially joined the war against the British. Franco-American squadrons now tore into British shipping lines while the big guns of the French fleet entered the fight in the American theater. This aid would prove critical to the war effort. The French managed to defeat the Royal Navy at the Battle of the Chesapeake, which allowed the British forces of Lord Cornwallis to be surrounded, besieged, and forced to surrender at Yorktown. These victories proved to be turning points, which soon brought about the end of the war. With the cessation of hostilities came a drawdown in naval activities. Congress recalled all of its privateers and official frigates, only a handful of which had survived the war. By 1785, the Continental Navy was officially disbanded and its remaining ships auctioned off. Over the following decade, the newly formed United States would find itself incredibly vulnerable at sea. Almost immediately, American merchant shipping lines fell prey to attacks. Corsairs from the Barbary states of North Africa in particular made a habit of seizing American ships and holding their crews for ransom. However, the bankrupted Congress was hard-pressed to raise a fleet in defense or even to simply pay the ransom. Pressure continued to mount. Finally, the Naval Act of 1794 was passed, ordering the construction of 6 frigates, of which only 3 were completed. Meanwhile, tensions were escalating with European powers. The French monarchy had just been overthrown in the midst of revolution and was now back to fighting the British. The United States was caught in the middle and became the target of privateers from both sides. A quasi-war even developed with France when Congress refused to pay its debt to the new revolutionary government. For 2 years, American and French forces would joust across the Atlantic. This had the effect of forcing the United States to finally take the Navy more seriously. In preparation for the action ahead, on April 30th, 1798, Congress authorized the creation of the Department of the Navy and the Office of the Secretary of the Navy. At the start of the conflict, the US Navy boasted 25 vessels, which patrolled the coast and set off to hunt down French privateers in the Caribbean. This new force was far superior to the ragtag force of the Continental Navy. Its ships now carried more firepower, with over 40 guns apiece, and its crews were far better trained. In action, this proved decisive. By the end of the conflict in 1800, the French had lost 2 frigates and several dozen privateers, at the cost of just 1 American warship. Though it should be noted that most of France's attention in this time was distracted elsewhere. Next, the newly expanded US fleet would be turned to deal with the Barbary War in 1801. The engagement here was one of blockade, with peace being settled by 1805 when Marines invaded the shores of Tripoli. In these affairs, the Navy had proved its worth, but was once again forced to reduce in size for budgetary reasons once victory was achieved. However, this drawdown would only last a short time due to the outbreak of renewed conflict with the British in the War of 1812. The US Navy at this time had a fleet of just 12 frigates and 14 smaller ships, which were once again supplemented by a large body of about 500 privateers. The opening stages of the war saw ships like the USS Constitution, the USS Wasp, and the USS United States best their opponents repeatedly in one-on-one combat. However, when the main British fleet arrived towards the end of 1812, with 11 ships of the line, 34 frigates, and 55 smaller craft, the balance of power swung decisively towards the Royal Navy. The US Navy still managed to pull off some victories, such as the Battle of Lake Erie, but by and large, command of the seas was yielded to the Crown. After all, the Royal Navy was still one of the most powerful forces in the world that had won great battles like Trafalgar just a few years earlier. Naval superiority allowed the British forces to blockade or raid coastal towns and support the action of the Royal Army, which dealt the Americans defeats, including the burning of Washington, D.C. Ultimately, the conflict drew to a close by 1814, when neither side could gain a decisive advantage and grew weary of the rapidly escalating costs. As peace was concluded, the US Navy would avoid being disbanded as had happened in 1785, and instead took its place as a permanent feature of the American Armed Forces. The following decades would be a time of great expansion for the United States, as its territory rapidly spread across the continent. This was by no means a bloodless affair, as many wars would be fought to defeat the native tribes that stood in the way. A war was even fought with Mexico in 1846 to ensure that Texas would be included in the manifest destiny of America. During this time, the US Navy would be subject to the rising tide of an expanding American military agenda. Congress recognized the importance of a long-term naval buildup and allocated funds to build 6 new 74-gun ships of war and 12 48-gun frigates. The largest amongst these, the USS Pennsylvania, actually boasted 120 guns and would be the largest sailing ship ever to serve in the US Navy. However, without a war with any major naval power, construction on these new vessels was rather slow. This all coincided with the advent of new technology coming out of the Industrial Revolution. The end was fast approaching for the age of sail, and one wondered if the current generation of ships being built wouldn't just be obsolete by the time they hit the water. The US Naval Department recognized this dilemma and was sure to begin experimentation with the latest in steam-powered ships. The first of these new vessels would be the Demologos warship launched in 1814. Though slow and unwieldy, it served as an important indicator of things to come. Over the following years, methods of propulsion were improved. Paddle wheels helped provide auxiliary power to the primary sail before eventually being capable of replacing it outright. However, these outboard wheels were susceptible to enemy fire, and thus, new screw-driven propellers were adopted to move the propulsion system within the body of the ship. By the 1840s, virtually all new warships were outfitted with some form of this new steam-powered technology. But while the scientists and engineers were busy preparing for the future, the US fleet had hard work to do in the here and now. Its first priority was to protect America's expanding maritime commerce. Anti-pirate campaigns were launched across the Caribbean, the West Indies, the Mediterranean, and the Gulf of Mexico. Naval squadrons sailed up rivers to support army activities against inland Indian tribes and also conducted by sending expeditions across the world in the hip new trend that was gunboat diplomacy. The most famous amongst these was Admiral Perry's visit to Japan, which resulted in the strong far smaller and less technologically advanced than the leading powers of the day. As we shall see though, upcoming war would serve to help catalyze the next wave of naval development. Outward expansion had not come without cost for the United States. They were no longer so united, especially when it came to the issue of slavery. This and many other contributing factors centers sought to leverage its numerically superior fleet to suffocate the South into submission with what was referred to as the Anaconda Plan. This strategy called for a strict blockade of the enemy's ports, which was to be followed up by a drive down the Mississippi to split the rebellion in half. To this end, Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles purchased or leased any ship that would float and armed it for duty. His efforts would rapidly increase the size of the US fleet from 90 to 260 ships within the first year of the war, with hundreds more to come. The Confederacy, on the other hand, lacked the resources to mount a similar blockade. Their efforts instead were aimed at blockade running capabilities and creating a small but powerful fleet of advanced ironclads. They were not starting completely from scratch, since roughly half of the US Navy's officer corps had defected, and a trove of Union ships and equipment was captured at Norfolk when it was seized by the Virginia militia. Blockade running efforts were mostly conducted by fast steamer ships operating out of England and manned by British sailors who had an interest in not only making a profit from the conflict, but also finding a way to knock the US down a peg. As for the Confederacy's goal of a small but powerful fleet, this would fall into the hands of the Confederate Secretary of the Navy, Stephen Mallory. He set about arming and purchasing a fast steamer squadron to assist in blockade busting and to prey on the Union merchant fleet out at sea. Closer to home, Mallory would launch an ironclad program aimed at building ships so tough it would render the enemy's vessels useless. The basic idea being to load up a steam-powered ship with as much armor as possible to withstand incoming shots while also boasting strong cannons and even ramming capabilities. The first ship would be the CSS Virginia, which was actually a retrofitted build of the USS Merrimack that had been captured at Norfolk. It was a casemate design, which basically just means it had a giant armored shell with fixed cannon holes in it. This is to be contrasted with the USS Monitor, which featured a revolving turret that was being rushed through construction once news got out of the Confederates' plan. Upon its completion, the Monitor sped south to intercept the Virginia, which had already taken out 3 Union frigates blockading Hampton Roads. What resulted was a nearly 3-hour duel between ironclads. Though neither side could inflict around the world, it was clear to all that naval wars of tomorrow would be won by this new class of warship. The battleship had been born. For the rest of the Civil War, the Union and the Confederacy would compete in the development of ironclads. This arms race also involved the development of other naval technologies like torpedoes, mines, and submarines. Overall, however, the South was unable to match the Union's investment in resources and manpower. By 1865, the Union had taken control of the Mississippi and New Orleans, while the blockade had gotten significantly stronger, such that the success rate of blockade runners dropped from 90% to less than 30%. The Confederacy was slowly succumbing to the Anaconda's coils. But the South would not go down without a fight. At sea and on the rivers, ironclads played an ever-increasing role in naval warfare. Over the course of the war, the Union would field over 50 of these ships, while the Confederacy boasted 33. The Battle of Mobile Bay proved just how dominating they could be on the battlefield, when it took about a dozen Union warships to take down the mighty CSS Tennessee. Eventually, thanks in part to US naval actions, the Confederacy would ultimately be defeated and forced to surrender on April 9, 1865. The Civil War had raised the US Navy to never-before-seen levels of development. At its height in 1865, it had nearly 51,000 men in uniform, almost 700 ships afloat, and roughly 60 ironclads. Altogether, this made it the second largest in the world, after the Royal Navy. However, the exorbitant costs could not be maintained, and the post-war years saw a huge drawdown in naval strength. Within a decade, the US Navy would only have a fleet of about 50 operational ships, crewed by around 6,000 men. The deterioration would continue as American priorities turned to other matters. By the late 1870s, most of the ironclads were laid up in dockyards that were ill-equipped and maintained. In world standings, the US Navy had dropped to 12th place. However, foreign danger would once again prompt action. In 1873, an uptick in tensions with Spain, coupled with the presence of a Spanish ironclad in the New York harbor, freaked out the Navy so much that it ordered the repair of several of its old ironclads, while issuing contracts for the construction of 5 new battleships. 4 of these were the Amphitrite-class monitors, which should be starting to look quite familiar to us. While these would have been impressive bastions of modernity, much of the rest of the fleet was still composed of outdated wooden vessels. Thus, in 1882, the Secretary of the Navy, William Hunt, requested funds for the construction of new ships. 5 new protected cruisers were built, along with the very first battleships, the USS Texas and the USS Maine, with more to follow in the years to come. In keeping with the latest in military thinking, they carried armored protection along their sides and guns with ever-increasing range. Yet further attention was brought to the Navy with the 1890s release of Alfred Thayer Mahan's influential book on sea power. Clearly, if the US were to be taken seriously as a world player in the upcoming century, it had to be prepared to dominate the waves. The truth of this lesson was driven home with the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in April of 1898. Fighting would largely be fought at sea around the territorial possessions of the Caribbean and the Philippines. Out west, the United States Asiatic Squadron under Commodore George Dewey would engage the Spanish Pacific Fleet at the Battle of Manila Bay. The Spanish squadron was composed of outdated and inferior ships which were outranged and outgunned by their American counterparts. The result was one of the most decisive naval battles in history, where an enemy fleet was crushed at the cost of only one slightly damaged vessel and a single death due to heat stroke. US naval power proved similarly decisive in the Caribbean theater, and the war was brought to a swift conclusion in just over 2 months. In this new world, Clearly, those who failed to keep up with the technological evolutionary race would not survive. Coming off the back of its victory in the Spanish-American War, the United States had lofty Roosevelt the charge with his famous motto, "Speak softly, but carry a big stick." This meant a huge investment in the Navy that would see it jump back up to being the second largest in the world. As a way of celebrating, Roosevelt would parade the new Great White Fleet around the world for all to see. Consisting of 16 battleships and numerous escorts, it was a formidable show of power. The epic 14-month journey also served as a training exercise for the Navy and taught it much about the logistics behind operating at such a large scale. With World War I just around the corner, this sort of experience would be invaluable. However, by the time the famed Great White Fleet was done showing off, it was already at risk of being rendered obsolete. The Royal Navy had just rolled out with its new revolutionary ship, the HMS Dreadnought. What was so important about this ship was that in the past, naval designers had always had to find a compromise with regards to speed versus armor and armament. Battleships were slow but powerful, while cruisers were fast but weak. The Dreadnought managed to combine the two by producing a ship that was both fast and powerful. It did so by introducing a brand new type of steam turbine engine. In addition, the HMS Dreadnought featured uniform main batteries for the first time, which were controlled by an advanced fire control system. Immediately, navies around the world raced to retrofit their fleets with the new design, whilst engaging in a feverish Dreadnought arms race. America owned ships in 1909 called the USS Michigan, South Carolina, Delaware, and North Dakota. But it wasn't would have to play catch-up. The battle at sea now expanded to include the space above and below the waves. In 1903, the Wright brothers had flown the world's first plane. By 1910, the US would be experimenting with launching biplanes from its ship decks, and in 1911 awarded its first contract for receiving aircraft. Meanwhile, underwater submarines were also being deployed. The US Navy acquired its first modern one with the commissioning of the USS Holland in 1900. Its descendants would become the Plunger-class sub, 5 of which formed the first US submarine fleet. More would be produced, but it would be the German U-boat that really led the pack in submarine technology. The First World War broke out in 1914, but the United States under President Woodrow Wilson remained neutral with a general policy of appeasement. However, as Germany's submarine warfare took a greater and greater toll at sea, including killing 128 Americans with the sinking of the Lusitania, Wilson began to seriously plan for war. The following year, Congress passed the Naval Act of 1916, which was to fund the construction of 10 battleships, 6 battlecruisers, 30 submarines, 50 destroyers, and other support craft. This would do much to catch up to the other major powers of the day, which had just fought the massive naval battle of Jutland. However, when the US finally entered the war in 1917, it would not go on to partake in any pitched battles at sea. Rather, the US Navy mostly focused on safely moving troops and material through U-boat infested waters. The production of battleships thus quickly gave way to the mass production of 273 destroyers and 400 submarine chasers for convoy protection and U-boat suppression activities. The new Navy Air Corps also got in on the action when it came to flying reconnaissance and hunting submarines. When the First World War ended on November 11, 1918, the US Navy's 6th Battle Squadron would join the Royal Navy as it watched the German fleet sail across the North Sea to formally surrender. Many of the ships in attendance on both sides specific ratio of capital ships between treaty nations. As a testament to how far the United States Navy had come, it was recognized as co-equal to the Royal Navy, with an allowance for up to 525,000 tons of capital ships and 135,000 tons of the emerging aircraft carrier type. But only a couple decades would pass before the world erupted into another global conflict. For the United States Navy, this was a scenario that was the constant source of discussion, and war plans would be developed to handle this eventuality. One of these, the famous War Plan Orange, looked across the Pacific towards a showdown with Japan, which had in recent years been building itself up as a regional powerhouse to be reckoned with. The Great Depression risked deteriorating the Navy's preparedness, but President Roosevelt, an old Navy man, earmarked $238 million from the National Industrial Recovery Act to build 32 new ships. Included in this count were 2 new aircraft carriers, the USS Yorktown and the Enterprise. These would join the 4 carriers already in the US fleet as a growing recognition of the importance of air dominance in naval combat. In the ensuing years leading up to World War II, the US would build 2 more carriers, 6 battleships, 3 heavy cruisers, 13 light cruisers, 83 destroyers, and 38 submarines. When World War II broke out in Europe, the United States was once again faced with the dilemma of whether or not to become involved. But as Axis forces overran Western Europe and threatened Eastern Asia, the US was forced to consider the very real possibility that it would soon face a 2-front war. In response, Congress passed the Two-Ocean Navy Bill in 1940, which pledged $2 billion to double the size of the combat fleet by adding 257 ships and 15,000 naval aircraft. The vast industrial capabilities of the United States now began to turn. Official US involvement in the war would be kicked off upon the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, which triggered declarations of war with Japan and Germany. In these matters, US naval efforts would first be directed towards Japan. Initially, the Imperial Japanese Navy began with a stronger force in the Pacific, but by the end of the war would be absolutely dwarfed by the immense numbers of ships pouring out of American factories and dockyards. To illustrate this point, I'll refer you to a fantastic video produced by Military History Visualized. Suffice to say, the Second World War was a truly transformative time for the US Navy, which of the final great leap of the US Navy. But so far, I hope we've been able to shed light on the many steps which led up to this critical moment in history. Stay tuned for more exciting content on this front. And again, a special thanks